Angels, it's Hailey Reese and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am so excited that you guys are here and I hope that you are having an absolutely fantastic morning, afternoon, or night, whatever it is for you when this video finally reaches you. Today's video is one that I am so excited to dive into because if you guys have been on my channel for a while, you guys would likely know that the very first spooky paranormal video I ever posted here on my channel was my experience babysitting a possessed child. So I thought that it would be interesting to take to Google and see other people's terrifying, real babysitting stories, and that is exactly what we are going to be doing today. I'm very curious to know if any of you guys have personally had any terrifying babysitting encounters, and if you have and you're comfortable with sharing, I would love it if you guys would let me know some of them down in the comment section below. But nonetheless, we are going to be hearing some terrifying ones today. Before we get into today's video though, I would just very quickly like to thank today's video sponsor, Blinkist. I have told you guys so many times on my channel and on my social medias how much I enjoy reading, especially books that can help me to improve myself and my life. But I can't even begin to tell you guys how many times I've wanted to start a new book but genuinely have not had the time to read an entire book. And that's why I am so excited to share the Blinkist app with you guys. Basically, Blinkist takes top nonfiction titles and puts them into 15-minute text and audio explainers called blinks. You can use blinks to learn about topics like personal growth, health and nutrition, science, history, and like so much more. There are thousands of titles in 27 categories of the world's best knowledge for you to choose from. And something else that I love is that you're able to access all titles even while offline. I've personally read and really enjoyed the You're a Badass at Making Money. They also have You're a Badass, which is one of the ones I'm going to be getting into next, so I highly recommend checking those out. And I also intend to listen to the Power books while I'm on my 31 Days of Halloween road trips. The first 100 people to go to www.blinkist.com/HaileyReese are going to get unlimited access for 1 week to try it out. The 7-day trial is completely free and you can cancel at any time during those 7 days. And you'll also get 25% off if you decide to get the full membership. So thank you so much to Blinkist for sponsoring today's video. As I mentioned, I will have it linked at the very top of my description, www.blinkist.com/HaileyReese. And without further ado, let's get into today's spooky stories. All right, so let's get into the very first story that I found. It's titled Scared Girl. I used to babysit for a family who lived a ways out of town. They had a beautiful house, a couple of great kids, and a really big yard. Beyond the yard, there were tons of trees. It was just very, very beautiful. And for the most part, it was peaceful and very serene. There were 2 kids, a boy and a girl. They were both sweet and well behaved. I had babysat for them for about 2 years when this happened. On the night it happened, nothing out of the ordinary happened at first. I came, the parents gave me money for their pizza, and let me know when they expected to be back. It would be really late, near to 4 o'clock in the morning, but this wasn't unusual for them. They liked to go to parties, and they went really late into the night. We had our pizza, watched some light TV, and then I sent them to bed. It was around 11 when I heard some walking around in the upstairs. It was weird because these 2 kids had iron bladders. They never got up to use the bathroom. I heard some footsteps for a couple of moments and then it was quiet again. I figured maybe the kids had got up for a moment or two. But then, about 10 minutes after the footsteps stopped, I heard the noise of someone walking again. This time, it was coming down the steps. I noticed the young girl I was sitting for come into the room. She was rubbing her eyes and ran up to me. She told me that some man had looked in her room from the hallway. I was only mildly concerned. I mean, as a babysitter, it was something that I would have to check out, but mainly I thought this was simply a little girl scared of shadows or who had had a bad dream. I checked out the entire house, and of course, there was no one in the house at all. However, even after I confirmed this, she was too scared to go back into her room and sleep by herself. So I went ahead and let her curl up next to me on the couch and go to bed. About 10 minutes after I'd been done checking the house, I heard this loud, blood-curdling human scream coming from outside of the house. The boy came running down the stairs shortly after. I had him sit on the couch with his sister while I went to check it out. I was scared as I went outside, but I had to make sure the kids were safe. I didn't think that I could call the police just because I heard one scream. I had the porch lights on and I walked around the side of the porch. While I was staring out to the trees, I once again heard a similar scream like the last one. It was coming out from in the trees on the left side of the house. I could feel the hair standing on the back of my neck. I was debating whether or not I should check out further what was going on outside or go back in the house. However, while I was thinking about it, I heard another scream coming from the same area, and that was enough. I ran into the house and told the son to call the police and then his parents. I told him I was going to check all the rooms to make sure that the house was secured. I gave him a baseball bat and I grabbed a knife without letting the kids see it. The first room I checked was the parents' room and was horrified to find the window not only open, but the screen removed. I closed and locked the window before I heard a fourth scream. I did my best to secure the house. However, I didn't want to spend too much time away from the kids. I got back to the kids and they had both called their parents and police. Both were on their way. We curled up on the couch until they arrived. We didn't hear any more screams. The police didn't find anyone, but I know the house was broken into. It could have been just a prank to scare us, and if it was, well, it worked. And that's the end of that experience. So whenever I read any stories like this, like anytime I'm reading anything, I don't know if you guys are like this. Actually, Sarah and I were talking about it recently, how some people don't visually see like images in their head or hear like voices in their head, if that makes sense. That's a whole other thing to discuss. But I personally, like when I'm reading a story, I can visualize it like a movie through my head, and I put myself in those people's shoes, and that freaked me out. Like, just imagine hearing those screams. Why was someone screaming? I mean, the little girl clearly did see someone in the house, which makes sense because the window was open. But what do you guys think the screaming was? Let me know that in the comments below. I'm very curious to know what you think of that experience, but let's get on to experience number 2. This one is called First Job. When I was about 14, my mom decided it was time I start babysitting. Apparently in her mind, it's just what teenagers are supposed to do. So when she heard that a coworker needed a babysitter for a date night with his wife, I found myself giving up a Friday evening for the promise of $20 and refrigerator privileges. This hit so close to home. My first job was a babysitter, and I made $20, and I also had refrigerator and pantry privileges, so I can relate. My mother drove me to their house at around 8. She practically pushed me out the car with a promise to pick me up at 11, and I was on my way to being financially independent. It was a very nice house in one of those subdivisions where all the houses look alike but still sell for hundreds of thousands. The door was answered by a rather handsome, well-dressed gentleman who I assumed was my mother's coworker, Barry. "Hi, you must be Jessica. You look just like your mother." He greeted me cheerfully, shaking my hand and leading me into the house. "Lydia's just putting Tommy down now. You probably won't hear a peep from him all night, so just enjoy yourself and try not to blow the house up." He smiled and showed me around their house while we waited for his wife. It was absolutely beautiful. They had more living rooms than my house had bedrooms. He was explaining how to bypass the parental controls on their humongous TV when his wife came into the room. She was beautifully dressed and looked no older than him, but there were lines around her eyes and she didn't meet my gaze. "Tommy's down for the night," she said, more to the wall than to me. Barry handed me the remote, put an arm around his wife, and said, "Then we better get going if we want to make our reservations." He began to lead her to the door. I saw her glance towards the stairs, obviously nervous about leaving her son. I didn't really get it. My mother said that Tommy was about a year old, so maybe this was her first time away from him, but I figured it was more just a mom thing. I reassured them that I knew how to handle the emergency situations and I had both of their cell phone numbers. Barry led his reluctant wife away from the house. I have to admit, I was pretty happy to realize the kid was going to be asleep, so I didn't really have to do anything. I went to the kitchen and put a frozen pizza in the oven. I microwaved a bag of popcorn to hold me off over until it was ready and proceeded to the main living room to see what was on TV. I was messing around with the surround system when I realized there was something odd. All of the pictures in the room, none of them contained Tommy. I mean, I could understand the lack of toys around. It was a large house and he probably had his own playroom set up, but the lack of pictures seemed odd. Just as I was noticing this, I managed to get the surround sound on and a commercial came on the TV, nearly blowing my ears out. I grabbed the remote and mashed the buttons until I managed to silence it. I was prepared to hear screams from Tommy, as the noise explosion certainly would have woken him, but I heard nothing. That was odd. There's no way that I hadn't just woken him up. Maybe I just couldn't hear him in this giant house. Well, I figured I'd better check on him to be sure. As I was walking up the large staircase, I realized they'd not even bothered to tell me what room he was in. I spotted a door with a blue dinosaur on it and figured it must be that one. Not wanting to wake him if he'd somehow managed to sleep through the noise, I very slowly and quietly opened the door. The room was dark except for a very soft nightlight on the wall opposing the door. By the dim light, I was once again overwhelmed by the luxury of everything, from the built-in shelves of the toys to the sleigh-style convertible crib where the boys slept. Seeing the small form from under the blankets, I was relieved. I watched him for a moment by the dim light and was just about to leave when something made me hesitate. Something didn't seem right. I stepped closer to the crib. I just wanted to make sure that he was okay, and then I'd go back downstairs to my popcorn and movie. Another step towards the crib, and then another. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong, but I didn't know what. As I reached the crib and stood over the sleeping form, it occurred to me, he wasn't breathing. Surely it was a trick of the light. I reached my hand down to put it on his back to feel any movement, but as my hand got closer, I realized there was no heat. A wave of panic washed over me. Something was wrong. He was dead. What had happened? Biting my lip, I reached out to touch him. What I felt under the blanket was not the body of a child. I ripped back the blanket and stared in horror at the eyes of a doll. I screamed as I stepped back, confused and horrified. I quickly turned on the light and looked around the room. Was Tommy old enough to play practical jokes? Was he hiding somewhere in the room? Even as I thought it, I knew that wasn't true. My eyes raked the room. Everything was set up perfectly. There was no child playing in here. The photos that were missing from downstairs were all over the room. There were photos with Santa, family portraits, first steps, first spaghetti, all the usual firsts, except there was no child, just this doll. This creepy doll that lay in the crib staring at me. I ran from the room and back downstairs where I immediately called my mom. She was confused but came to get me. She searched the room to make sure I wasn't mistaken somehow and that there wasn't some child somewhere else. It didn't take long before she came back down the stairs and took me straight to the car, and we just left. I realized later that what had tipped me off was something was wrong with the lack of smell. The warm, milky smell of a baby had been missing from that room. I was pretty sure no baby had ever even lived there. My mom paid me the $20 herself and never sent me to babysit again. And that's the end of that experience. Okay, so that one reminds me so much of the movie. I think it's called The Boy, if I'm not mistaken. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. It's a really good movie. But the main premise of this experience reminds me of that. The more that I was reading it though and thinking about it, a part of me is wondering if perhaps maybe she suffered the loss of an infant and is coping with the doll. But it is a little bit strange that it wasn't mentioned. I mean, did they assume that she'd never go check on their kid? That gives me a little bit of the heebie-jeebies, but I also feel like something's sad. There could be a sad backstory behind it. So I'd love to know what you guys think. Definitely comment down below. Do you think it was some sort of therapeutic thing? Or do you think that I don't know. I'd love to know your guys' thoughts and opinions down below. But let's get into the third experience. This one is called Treehouse. I used to babysit for a family that had 2 boys, one 10 and one 12. They were a lot easier to care for than you hear of boys those age. They played a lot outside in the backyard, and they even had a full treehouse that they spent a lot of time in. A lot of times when I was over there babysitting, they spent a lot of time playing in the treehouse. There were even times their parents would let them camp out in the treehouse. They'd done it a few times when I babysat, normally in the summer. In those instances, I only had to go out and check on them every so often. This took place during a pretty hot summer. The kids were all excited about sleeping out in the treehouse. Their mom had told me that it would be all right. I just had to go check on them every now and then in the treehouse. I tended to always do this, including after they'd already gone to sleep. So I went back and forth several times. The boys were staying up late, reading comics, and just being boys. When I went out to check on them at around 11 o'clock, they'd already fallen asleep. I turned off the light that they had and went back towards the house. On the way back though, I paused for just a moment. There was a light on in the second story of the house. That wasn't unusual on its own, but as I walked back towards the house, I saw the light turn off. This wasn't just the case of my eyes playing tricks. I mean, yeah, the light flipped off immediately after I got to the bottom of the tree, but I knew that I'd seen one. I wasn't sure what to do at first, but I took my cell phone and I called 911. After that, I climbed back up into the treehouse. I turned on the light quickly. I woke up the boys, but I didn't tell them what I'd seen, only that they would hear police sirens and not to worry. The police arrived and I watched from the treehouse as they went in. An officer also came over to the treehouse and indicated it was okay to come down from the tree. I watched again as cops came out of the house with a man in cuffs. They had found him hunkered down in the boys' room closet holding a knife. I don't know if he was waiting for them. I don't know if he was waiting for me. I don't know if he was just there to rob the place. But I'm glad that I saw the light switch off. And that's the end of that experience. Okay, so that one was a quick experience, but could you imagine walking back towards the house, seeing a light like turn off or turn on? No, turned off. Oh my gosh, Hailey, get it together. Seeing a light turn off and knowing that you're the only one in the house, and then finding out someone was in the house with a knife. Okay, one of the horror movies that scared me the most when I was a kid was When a Stranger Calls. And that experience is very reminiscent to me of When a Stranger Calls. Oof. What did you guys think of that one? Very curious to know. Well, you guys, those are 3 absolutely terrifying real-life babysitting encounters. I would absolutely love if you guys would like to see more of these, for me to do another video where I explore others. When I was looking online, there are a ton of experiences, so I definitely could. Which one of these scared you the most and why? And as I mentioned earlier, have you ever had your own terrifying babysitting experience? I mean, we all know that I have, but I'm curious to know if you guys have. Let me know. Once again, I would just absolutely love to thank Blinkist for sponsoring today's video. As I mentioned, the first 100 of you to go to www.blinkist.com/Hailey Reese. As I mentioned, it's linked at the very top of my description. You will receive unlimited access for 1 week to try it out and 25% off should you decide to get the membership. So thank you so much to Blinkist for sponsoring this video. If you guys are new to my channel or you are just not yet subscribed but you do enjoy my content, I would seriously love it more than you will ever know if you would go ahead and click that subscribe button. And please give this video a big thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Remember, my loves, do all things with kindness. And until next time, I love you.